You know that feeling, right? You blink, and suddenly an entire year has just vanished. One minute you're making New Year's resolutions, and the next you're hearing holiday music in the stores again. It really feels like life is stuck on fast forward. Well, let's get into the science behind this feeling and figure out why our internal clock seems to be picking up speed as we age. It's one of life's biggest puzzles, isn't it? When you were a kid, that summer vacation stretched out before you like an eternity, just filled with adventure. But now, as an adult, a whole month can just blow by and it feels like a weekend. I promise you, this is not just in your head. There are some very real psychological and even biological reasons why our perception of time changes so much. Think about it. In childhood, our days are absolutely jam-packed with firsts. Your first bike ride, your first time at the beach, every single experience is brand new, and it creates this super rich, detailed log in your brain. A single afternoon could feel like an epic adventure. But in adulthood, we get into routines, drive to work, meetings, dinner, TV. With way fewer new experiences, our brain just doesn't have as much new stuff to process. So the days, the weeks, and the months all start to blur together, making it feel like time is just slipping through our fingers. Okay, so let's get one thing straight right away. That feeling of time accelerating, it's not just a vague feeling. It's a real, documented phenomenon, and it points to a pretty fundamental shift in how our brains are actually logging the passage of our lives. Here's the most important thing to grasp. Physical time, the actual ticking of a clock, is not the same thing as mind time. Our internal clock, our subjective sense of time, is super flexible. It can speed up or slow down depending on what we're doing, how we're feeling, and what our brain decides is worth paying attention to. It's this mental clock that we're going to unpack. So, how in the world does this mental clock actually work? Well, the secret ingredient, it turns out, is memory. You can almost think of your brain as its own little time machine. The way it stores and organizes memories directly shapes how you look back on the past. Okay, so one of the big theories here is called the storage size metaphor. I want you to think of your memory like a computer's hard drive. Now, imagine a week where you went on a trip, started a new project, met a bunch of new people. That week fills the hard drive with a ton of data, right? So when you look back, your brain sees all that stored info and says, whoa, a lot happened. That must have been a really long week. And building on that idea, the contextual change hypothesis says it's not just about the amount of new information. It's about how significant it is. It's those moments of real, meaningful change that stretch out our sense of time. Routine things like your daily commute just get compressed. But big moments that mark a real shift, like a graduation, moving to a new city, starting a new job, they act like these huge anchors in your memory, making the time around them feel way more substantial. This slide just illustrates that difference so perfectly. A child's life is kind of like a feature film. Every scene is totally new, the brain is hitting record on everything, and the story feels really long and full of detail. But an adult's life, especially when it's full of routines, is more like a highlight reel. The brain just captures the important moments and kind of fast forwards through all the repetitive stuff, which makes the whole thing feel much, much shorter. So let's just break it down. Novelty, trying new food, going to a new place, it forces your brain to wake up, pay attention, and create these thick, detailed memories. When that happens, time feels expanded. Routine, on the other hand, puts your brain straight onto autopilot. It doesn't need to record the 500th time you drove to the office, so those days become mentally invisible, and time feels compressed. But, this isn't just a story about psychology and memory. Let's look at the biology. Because the actual physical hardware of your brain is also changing as you get older, and that has a huge impact on your internal clock. This theory is absolutely fascinating. Okay, so as we get older, our neural pathways get way bigger and more complex. It's like going from a small town with a few roads to a giant city with a massive highway system. This means electrical signals actually have farther to travel, which slows down your brain's processing speed. So as an adult, your brain is capturing fewer frames of the world per second than it did when you were a kid. Think of it like a flipbook. If you have fewer pages, you get to the end of the story a whole lot faster. And beyond just the processing speed, our brain chemistry is a huge player here. The neurotransmitter dopamine, especially, seems to be really involved in how our internal clock ticks. In fact, studies are showing that people with lower dopamine function often report that time feels like it's moving much faster, more accelerated. Now get this. This slide shows us some hard data. In one study, they gave people a drug called tolcapone, which actually boosts dopamine in the brain. When they were on a placebo, they had what's called a compressed time perspective. Basically, time felt faster than it really was. But with that dopamine boost, their perception of time became way more accurate. This is pretty strong evidence that our brain chemistry is directly tuning our internal clock.
Okay, so we've dug into the psychology and we've dug into the biology. But that leaves the most important question. Are we just stuck with this speeding clock? And the answer is no, not at all. In fact, all this science gives us a pretty clear roadmap for how we can start to reclaim our perception of time.
This quote says it all, really. If you want to slow down how you perceive time, you have to consciously fight against that autopilot mode. The more you can shake up your daily life, the more new material you give your brain to work with. You're basically thickening the plot of your own life story.
So, how do we actually do this? How can we actively thicken time? Well, first, seek out novelty. Take a totally different route to work, try to learn a new skill, travel somewhere you've never been. Second, pay close attention. Like, really pay attention. Put your phone down and just engage your senses in whatever you're doing right now. And finally, get good sleep. A brain that's well-rested forms much clearer memories, and that helps put the brakes on those runaway days.
So in the end, what we've seen is that our experience of time isn't just something that happens to us. It's something we actively co-create with our own brain. And by understanding how our mental clock works, we get the power to influence it. So the question I want to leave you with is this. If your life is basically a story written in memory, what new chapters are you going to add to make that story feel rich, full, and wonderfully long?